The parking lot was completely empty. I sat on the concrete steps outside Lincoln Middle School, clutching my backpack straps so tight my knuckles turned white. The last bus had left an hour ago, and every other kid had been picked up by parents who actually remembered they existed. The sun was setting, painting everything orange and gold, but all I felt was cold dread in my stomach. Where were they? I checked my phone for the 100th time, 5:47 p.m. School had ended at 3:15. I'd been waiting for 2.5 hours, watching car after car pull up for other kids, hoping each one might be mom or dad finally realizing they'd forgotten about me. But the cars kept coming and going, taking everyone home except me. A janitor walked by and gave me a pitying look. "Still waiting, honey?" he asked gently. I nodded, too embarrassed to explain that my own parents had completely forgotten I existed. The building was locked now, security lights flickering on automatically. I was truly alone, abandoned in an empty school parking lot, wondering what I'd done wrong to deserve being so forgettable. My hands shook as I dialed Mom's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Patricia. Leave a message." Her cheerful voice mocked me from the recording. I tried Dad next. Same thing, straight to voicemail after several rings. "This is Michael. I can't come to the phone right now." I wanted to scream. Where were they? What could possibly be more important than picking up their own daughter from school? I tried texting both of them. "Where are you?" "I'm still at school." No response. The little message showed delivered, but not read. They weren't even looking at their phones. Fear started mixing with anger in my chest, creating a burning feeling that made me want to throw my phone across the empty parking lot. I called Mom again, and this time it went straight to voicemail. She'd declined my call. Actually declined it. My own mother had seen my number and chosen not to answer while I sat abandoned at school. The rejection hit harder than being forgotten. This was deliberate now. Mrs. Henderson, my English teacher, found me crying on the school steps 40 minutes later. "Sweetie, what are you still doing here?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I tried to explain without completely breaking down. "My parents, they didn't come. They're not answering their phones." Mrs. Henderson's face went through several emotions: surprise, anger, then protective determination. "Come on, I'll drive you home," she said firmly. The car ride was the most humiliating 15 minutes of my life. I had to give directions to my own house while Mrs. Henderson made polite small talk, trying to make me feel better. "Sometimes these things happen," she said kindly. "I'm sure there's a good explanation." But I could hear the doubt in her voice. Normal parents don't just forget their kids exist. As we pulled into my driveway, I saw both Mom and Dad's cars parked there, which meant they'd been home the whole time. They just hadn't cared enough to remember they had a daughter waiting at school. Mrs. Henderson walked me to the door, clearly planning to have words with my parents about this. The front door was unlocked, and the sound of laughter drifted from the dining room. Lots of laughter, multiple voices, the clinking of glasses and silverware. I walked in with Mrs. Henderson behind me, and the scene that greeted us made my stomach drop to my feet. The dining room table was set with our good china, candles were lit, and about 8 adults were seated around my brother Tyler, enjoying what looked like a celebration dinner. There were flowers, fancy food, and everyone was dressed up like it was a special occasion. Tyler sat at the head of the table like a king, grinning widely while Mom and Dad beamed at him with more pride than I'd seen in years. The conversation stopped when they noticed us standing in the doorway. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Mom's face went slightly pale as she seemed to remember something. "Oh," she said quietly, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh no." That's when it hit me. They hadn't just forgotten to pick me up from school. They'd been throwing Tyler a dinner party while I sat abandoned in an empty parking lot for over 3 hours. "We were just so busy with Tyler's celebration dinner," Mom said, not quite meeting Mrs. Henderson's stern gaze. "It completely slipped our minds." Slipped their minds. Like I was some minor errand they'd forgotten to run, not their own child stranded at school. Dad nodded along, looking uncomfortable but not apologetic. "These things happen," he said with a shrug. "She's fine, aren't you, honey?" Mrs. Henderson's jaw tightened. "These things don't just happen," she said firmly. "A child was left alone for over 3 hours. This is serious neglect. But my parents just looked annoyed at being lectured. Stop being so dramatic, Mom snapped at me, as if this was somehow my fault. You could have walked home. It was 3 miles, and I wasn't allowed to walk alone after dark, a rule they'd made themselves. Tyler smirked from his seat at the table, clearly enjoying the drama he was causing just by existing. Sorry, sis, he said, not sounding sorry at all. Guess they love me more. The adults at the table laughed uncomfortably, and I felt my cheeks burn with shame. Mrs. Henderson squeezed my shoulder protectively before leaving, but I could see the pity in her eyes. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I started remembering other times I'd been forgotten. My 13th birthday, when they'd planned an elaborate party for Tyler's friend, but forgot mine completely until I mentioned it at dinner. The school play where I had a solo, and they missed it because Tyler had a baseball game the same night, even though his game was just practice. Parent-teacher conferences they'd skipped, awards ceremonies they'd forgotten, recitals where I'd scan the audience desperately looking for familiar faces that never came. It wasn't just today. It was a pattern going back years, maybe my whole life. I'd always made excuses for them. They were busy. They had a lot on their minds. Tyler needed more attention because he was younger. But now I saw the truth clearly. I wasn't forgotten accidentally. I was ignored deliberately. They simply didn't care enough about me to remember I existed unless I was directly in front of them. And even then, I was more like a piece of furniture than a daughter. The realization hurt worse than being left at school, because it meant this would never change. At breakfast the next morning, Tyler was still glowing from his celebration dinner. Did you see all the presents I got? He asked smugly, gesturing to a pile of gifts on the counter. A new laptop, expensive sneakers, concert tickets, gift cards, probably over $1,000 worth of stuff. What was the dinner for again? I asked, genuinely curious what could warrant such an elaborate celebration. Tyler's grin got wider. I made JV basketball. Coach said I might get some playing time this season. JV. Not even varsity. Not even a starting position. Just making the team was enough to trigger a full family celebration with extended relatives and fancy dinners. Meanwhile, I'd made honor roll every semester for 2 years straight, won the regional writing competition, and been selected for advanced placement classes. None of that had earned so much as a congratulations card. Mom ruffled Tyler's hair affectionately. We're just so proud of our star athlete, she cooed. Dad beamed like Tyler had won an Olympic medal. I sat at the table eating cereal, completely invisible while they planned Tyler's next celebration. Apparently making the team meant he deserved a weekend trip too. Dinner that night was excruciating. I sat at the table trying to participate in conversation, but it was like I wasn't even there. Mom asked Tyler about his friends, his classes, his practice schedule, his plans for the weekend. Dad wanted to hear every detail about the new coach and Tyler's chances of getting more playing time. They hung on his every word like he was revealing secrets of the universe. When there was finally a pause, I tried to contribute. I got my history test back today. I got a 98. Silence. Mom was refilling Tyler's water glass. Dad was checking his phone. Tyler was texting someone under the table. Nobody even acknowledged I'd spoken. I tried again, louder this time. My teacher said it was the highest score in the class. Still nothing. It was like I was a ghost sitting at my own family's dinner table, completely invisible to the people who were supposed to love me most. Tyler finished his story about some joke his teammate had told, and both parents laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I excused myself from the table, but nobody noticed I'd left. Mrs. Henderson pulled me aside after English class. How are you doing after yesterday? She asked gently. Are things better at home? I wanted to tell her the truth, that nothing had changed, that I was still invisible, that my parents cared more about Tyler's basketball practice than my entire existence. But what was the point? Adults always said they wanted to help, but they couldn't fix parents who simply didn't love one of their children. I'm fine, I lied, forcing a smile. They were just distracted. It won't happen again. Mrs. Henderson studied my face carefully. You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If things aren't okay at home, there are people who can help. But I knew better. Reporting your parents for emotional neglect when they provided food and shelter was complicated. How do you explain that they weren't abusive, just indifferent? That they didn't hurt me, they just didn't care? Mrs. Henderson meant well, but she couldn't make my parents love me. Nobody could. I thanked her and changed the subject to homework, but I could feel her worried eyes following me as I left her classroom. I started keeping a journal that night, writing down every time I was forgotten, ignored, or dismissed. Maybe seeing it on paper would help me understand if this was normal or if my parents really were as awful as they seemed. October 15th, left at school for 3+ hours while Tyler got celebration dinner. Parents claimed they forgot. October 16th, mentioned honor roll score at dinner. Nobody responded. October 17th, asked Dad for help with math homework. He said he was busy watching Tyler's highlight videos. Page after page filled up with evidence of my invisibility. Some entries were big things, missing my award ceremony to take Tyler shopping. Others were tiny moments that hurt just as much. Dad walking past me in the hallway without saying hello, Mom signing permission slips for Tyler while leaving mine on the counter for days. The journal became my witness, proof that I wasn't imagining the neglect. It also became my friend, the only place I could be completely honest about how much this hurt. Writing it down didn't make the pain go away, but it made me feel less crazy for noticing it. 2 weeks later, it happened again. I stood in the same spot, watching Tyler get picked up in Mom's brand new SUV, the one she'd bought specifically for family adventures that apparently didn't include me. I watched them drive away through the school window, Tyler in the passenger seat talking animatedly, while Mom smiled and laughed at whatever story he was telling. 20 minutes later, I was still standing there alone. This time I didn't even bother calling. I knew they'd either ignore me or give me the same tired excuses. Instead, I started walking. 3 miles in my backpack and school shoes, but at least I wasn't waiting around like a lost puppy hoping someone would remember I existed. The walk gave me time to think, and by the time I reached home, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to keep letting them hurt me like this. If they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, fine. Two could play that game. I slipped into the house quietly and went straight to my room, not announcing I was home or asking about dinner. Let them wonder where I was for once. Mrs. Patterson from next door cornered me while I was checking the mail. "Honey," she said gently, "I've noticed you walking home from school a lot lately. Is everything okay?" The concern in her voice made my throat tight. "I'm fine," I managed. "I just like the exercise." She didn't believe me. "It's just that I see your brother getting picked up, and then you walking home alone later. It seems." She paused, choosing her words carefully. Uneven. That was a polite way of saying my parents obviously favored Tyler. The shame burned in my chest, knowing that even the neighbors had noticed how differently I was treated. "Your parents love you very much," Mrs. Patterson continued, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Sometimes adults get distracted and don't realize how their actions affect their children. I wanted to scream that this wasn't distraction. It was deliberate indifference. But Mrs. Patterson was trying to be kind, so I just nodded and thanked her for caring. As I walked away, I heard her sigh sadly behind me. I finally exploded at dinner the next night. "Why don't you care about me?" I asked, my voice shaking with months of suppressed anger. Tyler gets picked up from school, gets celebration dinners, gets new clothes and electronics. I get forgotten and ignored. What did I do wrong? The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Dad looked uncomfortable, like I'd brought up something embarrassing at a family gathering. Tyler just smirked, clearly enjoying my breakdown. Finally, Mom spoke. "Don't be so dramatic," she said dismissively. "We love you just as much as Tyler." The words felt empty, automatic, like she was reading from a script. "Then why?" I started, but Mom cut me off. "You'll understand when you're older," she said firmly. "Tyler needs more attention right now because he's going through an important phase in his development." Important phase. Like making JV basketball was more crucial than my entire emotional well-being. I stared at her, realizing she actually believed what she was saying. In her mind, Tyler's needs would always be more important than mine, and I was selfish for expecting equal treatment. I started staying after school at the library instead of going home. Mrs. Carson, the librarian, was a quiet woman who never asked too many questions, but always had a kind word and sometimes homemade cookies to share with students who lingered after hours. "Working on homework again?" she'd ask, and I'd nod, grateful for the peaceful space where nobody ignored me or made me feel invisible. The library became my sanctuary. I'd do homework, read for pleasure, and sometimes just sit in the comfortable chairs watching other kids get picked up by parents who remembered they existed. Mrs. Carson started recommending books to me, and we'd have quiet conversations about stories and characters. She treated me like my thoughts mattered, like I was worth listening to. It was such a contrast to home that sometimes I'd stay until the library closed just to avoid going back to people who barely acknowledged my existence. "You're always welcome here," Mrs. Carson told me one evening, and I could tell she meant it. For the first time in months, I felt like someone actually wanted me around. Mrs. Carson read my essay about overcoming challenges and called me to her desk afterward. "This is exceptional writing," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "Have you considered entering writing competitions? There are scholarships available for students with your talent." Scholarships. The word hit me like lightning. A way out. A path to a future where my worth wasn't determined by parents who couldn't see my value. Mrs. Carson printed out information about essay contests, creative writing programs, and academic scholarships for students with strong English skills. "You have a gift," she said seriously. "Don't let anyone make you forget that." I clutched those papers like they were made of gold. For the first time in months, I felt hope flickering in my chest. Maybe I couldn't make my parents love me, but I could work toward a future where their love didn't matter. Mrs. Carson helped me set up accounts on scholarship websites and showed me how to research programs that would value students like me. "You're going places," she said confidently. I can tell. Her faith in me felt like sunlight after months of living in shadows. I spent hours researching colleges and scholarship opportunities, printing applications in the library, and hiding them in my backpack. Full-ride academic scholarships, merit-based aid, programs specifically for students with exceptional writing abilities. I started writing essays in secret, crafting personal statements about overcoming adversity without directly mentioning my family situation. "Describe a time when you had to rely on your own strength" was easier to answer than I'd expected. I had plenty of material. Mrs. Carson helped me edit my applications, offering suggestions and encouragement when I doubted myself. "Your resilience shines through every word," she told me after reading my personal statement. "Admissions committees will see what I see, a remarkable young person who doesn't give up." I applied to 15 different programs, from local state schools to prestigious universities, anywhere that offered full scholarships to students with my grades and test scores. Each application felt like a ticket to freedom, a chance to build a life where I mattered. My parents had no idea I was planning my escape. To them, I was still just the invisible daughter who would probably stay home forever. Tyler's 16th birthday party was legendary, at least according to everyone who was invited. I wasn't. Mom planned for weeks, sending out professional invitations, hiring a DJ, renting tables, and a dance floor for the backyard. The guest list included Tyler's entire class, extended family, and family friends. I watched the preparations from my bedroom window, feeling like a stranger observing someone else's life. The morning of the party, Mom was rushing around in party planning mode when I asked, "Should I help set up?" She looked at me blankly, like she'd forgotten I lived there. "Oh, honey, this is really Tyler's day. Maybe you could spend the afternoon at the library or something. The house is going to be pretty crowded." I was being asked to leave my own home during my brother's birthday party. Not because there wasn't room for me, but because they simply hadn't included me in any of the planning. I wasn't even an afterthought. I was completely absent from their minds. I spent Tyler's entire birthday party walking around town, killing time until the celebration for the golden child was over and I could return home safely. The comment that broke something inside me came during a casual family conversation about college expenses. Tyler was talking about wanting to go to an expensive private university, and Mom and Dad were already discussing how they'd make it work financially. "We'll figure it out," Dad said warmly. "Whatever it takes for our boy." Then Tyler, clearly feeling generous, asked about my college plans. What about my sister? Where does she want to go? All eyes turned to me, the first time they'd shown interest in my future in years. I've been looking at some schools, I said carefully. There are some good programs that offer merit scholarships. Dad's expression darkened. Scholarships? Don't get your hopes up too high. College is expensive. And we can't afford to send both of you. The implication was clear. Tyler's education was a priority worth any sacrifice, but mine was a luxury they couldn't justify. You're lucky we keep a roof over your head and food on the table, Dad continued harshly. Don't expect us to fund some fancy college dream too. The words hit me like a physical blow. After 16 years of being treated like a burden instead of a beloved daughter, he'd finally said it out loud. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. Full academic scholarship to State University, covering tuition, room, board, and books for 4 years. Everything paid for based on my grades, test scores, and essay about overcoming challenges. I stood in the kitchen holding the letter, reading it 3 times to make sure it was real. I'd done it. I'd earned my way out completely on my own merit, without needing a penny from parents who saw me as a financial burden anyway. The letter praised my exceptional academic record and compelling personal statement about resilience in the face of adversity. They wanted me. A whole university thought I was worth investing in, even if my own family didn't. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my backpack. I wouldn't tell them yet. This victory was mine alone, and I wanted to savor it without their indifference crushing my joy. For the first time in my life, I'd accomplished something that had nothing to do with Tyler, something they couldn't take credit for or minimize. I was going to college, and I was going to do it without their help or approval. I started packing quietly, a little bit each day so nobody would notice. Old clothes I'd outgrown went into donation bags. Books and personal items I wanted to keep went into boxes hidden under my bed. Important documents, birth certificate, social security card, bank account information, went into a folder I kept with me at all times. The scholarship had specific requirements about maintaining my GPA and completing certain courses, and I researched everything obsessively to make sure I wouldn't lose this opportunity. Meanwhile, Tyler was being celebrated for getting accepted to his dream school, even though his grades were mediocre and Dad would have to take out massive loans to pay for it. Our college boy, Mom kept saying, posting photos of Tyler in university sweatshirts. She bought him everything he could possibly need for dorm life, while I secretly ordered basic necessities online with money I'd saved from babysitting jobs. They were so focused on Tyler's achievement that they didn't notice their other child was quietly planning her departure from their lives forever. At dinner 3 weeks before graduation, I finally made my announcement. Tyler was complaining about having to take summer classes to prepare for college, and Mom was reassuring him that they'd hire a tutor if needed. Dad was nodding along, already calculating the cost of additional academic support for their precious son. I have some news too, I said quietly. The conversation stopped, and 3 faces turned toward me with mild curiosity. I got accepted to State University. Full scholarship. I'm leaving for orientation in June. The silence stretched out uncomfortably. Mom's fork clanged against her plate. Dad's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Tyler looked confused, like he couldn't process that his invisible sister had accomplished something significant without his knowledge. Full scholarship? Mom repeated slowly. How did you even apply? We never discussed this. I didn't need your permission to apply for college, I said calmly. I've been planning this for months. Everything's arranged. I won't cost you anything. I'd expected shock, but I hadn't expected their next reaction. Instead of pride or congratulations, they looked almost annoyed. Wait, Mom said, her voice rising with something like panic. You can't just leave. Who's going to help with the house? Who's going to cook dinner when I'm working late? Dad nodded along, looking genuinely confused. You've always handled the laundry and grocery shopping. Tyler's going to be busy with college prep. He can't take on extra responsibilities right now. The truth hit me like a slap. They weren't upset about losing their daughter. They were upset about losing their unpaid household servant. All those years of doing chores while Tyler played video games, cooking dinner while he was at practice, managing household tasks while he focused on being the golden child, they'd never seen it as me being helpful. They'd seen it as my purpose, my role in the family structure. I'm sure there are good local schools, Mom continued desperately. You could live at home, save money, and still help out with everything. Tyler was nodding along, clearly relieved that he wouldn't have to step up and contribute to the household. Yeah, why do you need to go away to college? Home is perfectly fine. They literally wanted me to give up a full scholarship to a prestigious university so I could continue being their unpaid live-in help while Tyler got to pursue his dreams. I stood up from the dinner table, looking at the 3 people who were supposed to be my family. I'm not your maid, I said quietly. I'm not Tyler's personal assistant. I'm your daughter, but you've never treated me like one. Mom's face flushed red. How can you say that? We love you, no, I interrupted. You love having me around to do work you don't want to do. You love that I don't cost you money or demand attention. But you don't love me. Dad started to protest, but I held up my hand. I've been keeping track. Tyler gets picked up from school while I walk home. Tyler gets celebration dinners while I get forgotten. Tyler gets college tuition while I get told I'm lucky to have a roof over my head. My voice was steady, calm, matter of fact. I earned this scholarship with grades you never celebrated, essays you never read, achievements you never acknowledged. I'm taking it. I walked toward my room, then turned back. And I'm leaving this house the day after graduation. You have 3 weeks to figure out who's going to do the dishes. The silence behind me felt heavier than any argument could have. Moving day came faster than expected. Mrs. Carson helped me load my few belongings into her car, along with Mrs. Henderson, who had insisted on being part of my send-off committee. Both women had tears in their eyes as they hugged me goodbye. You're going to do amazing things, Mrs. Carson whispered. Don't forget to write. I promised I would. My parents stood in the doorway watching, but didn't help carry boxes or say goodbye. Tyler was still in bed. Apparently seeing his sister leave forever wasn't worth getting up early on a Saturday. You'll be back, Mom said with forced confidence. When you realize how hard real life is, you'll come home. But I knew better. I was going toward something better, not running away from something hard. As Mrs. Carson's car pulled out of the driveway, I didn't look back at the house where I'd spent 16 years feeling invisible. 3 months later, I posted my first college photos on social media, my dorm room, my new friends, my first semester grades. The comments poured in from teachers, classmates, and neighbors who remembered the quiet girl who'd always seemed older than her years. The phone call came during finals week of my second semester. I was in the library studying for my economics exam when Tyler's name appeared on my screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message later. Hey, Mom wanted me to call. She's having some issues with, well, everything since you left. The house is kind of a mess, and she's stressed about managing all the stuff you used to do. Also, I'm struggling with my classes and might need to come home, so could you maybe call her back? She wants to talk about you maybe transferring to a local school or something. I deleted the message without responding. 2 days later, Mom called directly. Sweetie, we miss you so much. The house isn't the same without you. Maybe we could work something out. You could come home and commute to a local college, help out with the family. I hung up without answering. They'd had 16 years to treat me like family. Now that they needed something from me, suddenly I mattered. But I'd learned my worth at a university that valued my mind, surrounded by friends who chose to spend time with me, supported by professors who saw my potential. I'd found my real family among people who celebrated my successes instead of ignoring them. The girl they'd forgotten at school had grown into a woman they couldn't ignore, and I was never going back to being invisible again. If this story of resilience and self-worth touched your heart, please subscribe for more inspiring tales of young people who refuse to accept being treated as less than they deserved. Share this with anyone who needs a reminder that your value isn't determined by how others treat you, it's determined by how you choose to see yourself. Your support helps us tell more stories of triumph over neglect and the power of believing in your own worth when no one else will.